My name is Shannon. I'm 36 years old. The judge was gunning for me. You could see it on his face. He wore this permanent sneer, a mask of contempt he'd put on just for me. He cut me off, twisted my words, and made his bias so painfully obvious the air in the courtroom crackled with it. The other lawyer was practically giddy like the judge's personal cheerleader in a three-piece suit. But I didn't take the bait. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there, calm as can be, and let him dig his own grave. He had no clue the man he was trying to humiliate was the lead prosecutor investigating him. It started the second he walked in. Courtroom 4B was already cold, but when Judge Lawrence Holston swept in, the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The heavy oak door slammed behind him, and the sound wasn't one of authority. It was just pure, raw anger. He blew right past the customary "all rise," stomped to the bench, and his black robes flowed around him like a storm, a cloud. He wasn't looking at anyone, just staring at some invisible point of fury straight ahead. Something was very wrong. I was at the plaintiff's table, my client Alex beside me, nervously wringing his hands. The case was almost insultingly small, a simple motion to suppress evidence in a minor possession charge. It was the kind of hearing that should have taken 15 minutes tops, a blip. But my gut told me this wasn't going to be simple. Not with this judge. Judge Holston's reputation was well known. The whispers around the DA's office painted a picture of a guy drunk on his own power, a petty tyrant who loved making lawyers squirm. He was especially known for his hatred of public defenders and, apparently, any new face he didn't recognize. Today, I was that new face. "Let's get this farce over with," Holston barked, his voice slicing through the room. He finally locked eyes with me. "You're Mr. Thorne?" "Marcus Thorne, Your Honor, here on behalf of Mr. Reynolds." I kept my voice perfectly even. It was the first move in a game he had no idea we were even playing. He scoffed a nasty, wet sound. "Right. The motion to suppress. On what grounds? Let me guess. The wind blew the wrong way and your client's rights were magically violated?" The opposing counsel, a weasel of a man named Peterson, let out a pathetic little chuckle. Beside me, Alex flinched. "No, Your Honor," I said calmly. "The grounds are a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. The search was conducted without probable cause after a stop that had no legal basis. It's all in the motion I filed." Judge Holston picked up the file, holding it between his thumb and forefinger like it was a dirty diaper. He didn't even open it. "I've read your little piece of fiction, Mr. Thorne, and I find it unconvincing." He tossed the file aside. It slid right off the bench and fluttered to the floor. The court clerk, a woman who'd clearly seen it all, winced. "Your Honor, if I may present my argument—" "You may not," he snapped. "I'm not wasting this court's time on frivolous arguments from a lawyer who looks like he got his degree from a cereal box. Motion denied." The gavel slammed down. It happened so fast, so blatantly that you could hear a gasp from the gallery. Alex just slumped in his chair, completely defeated. Peterson was beaming, already packing his briefcase like he'd just won a Supreme Court case. This was the moment every fiber of my being screamed at me to object, to yell about due process, to fight back. This was the exact injustice I'd been warned about, the very behavior I was there to see. My heart was pounding, but on the outside, I was stone. I took a slow breath and leaned into the microphone. "Noted for the record, Your Honor." That's it. 4 simple words. No anger, no argument. Judge Holston froze. He was already turning to the next case, but my calmness stopped him cold. He slowly turned back, a flicker of confusion on his face. He expected a fight. He wanted a fight. He fed on the outrage of people he wronged, and I was starving him. Noted for the record, he mimicked in a childish voice. Is that all you've got, counselor? You roll over that easily? I met his gaze. I have nothing further to add at this time, Your Honor. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting match. It was the sound of a predator whose prey refused to run. He just stared at me, his jaw working, and for the first time I saw the faintest tremor in his hands. Oh, he wasn't done. My refusal to play his game had only wounded his ego, and now he was bleeding all over the courtroom. He made us wait. For the next hour, he deliberately skipped our case, handling 3 other hearings with a ridiculous display of fairness. It was a power play meant to make me and my client stew in our own helplessness. Alex was falling apart. What is happening? He whispered, his voice shaking. Why is he doing this? I thought you said we had a strong case. We do, I replied quietly, my eyes fixed on the judge. And he's making it stronger for us every second. Just breathe. Trust me. Finally, Holston's gaze fell on us again. All right, Mr. Thorne. Since your motion was so spectacularly incompetent, we'll proceed directly to arraignment. How does your client plead? He wasn't just bending the rules anymore, he was snapping them in two. Forcing a plea right then and there was a complete breach of protocol, designed to create a legal train wreck. Your Honor, with all due respect, my client can't enter a plea until we've addressed the constitutional violations here. I again request the chance to present my arguments on the motion to suppress. I was a broken record of calm, professional respect. Judge Holston leaned forward, his knuckles white on the bench. His breathing was heavier now, loud, enough for me to hear. Mr. Thorne, I'm holding the gavel. You're not. That means you're in my world, and you play by my rules. My rule is that I denied your motion. The issue is closed. Now, for the last time, how does your client plead? Peterson, the other lawyer, popped up. The state is ready for a plea, Your Honor. We believe the defense is just using stall tactics. The judge nodded. I agree, Mr. Thorne. I'm finding you obstructive. One more word out of you that isn't guilty or not guilty, and I will hold you in contempt. There it was, the ultimate threat, the humiliation of being reprimanded, maybe even cuffed right in front of my client for doing my job. The judge's face was flushed with victory. He thought he had me backed into a corner. My voice, when I spoke, was still quiet, but it had a new weight to it. It was the sound of a lock clicking into place. Your Honor, I can't ethically advise my client to enter a plea while his rights are being actively dismantled by this court. Your refusal to hear arguments, your open bias, every action you've taken is being meticulously documented. I paused. My report will be accurate. Those last 3 words landed like stones in a silent pond. It's not a phrase a normal defense attorney would use. A report? For who? It was a subtle crack in the facade of the powerless lawyer he thought I was. The judge's sneer faltered. Your report? He asked, his arrogance now laced with a sharp edge of uncertainty. What report? Who are you to be writing reports? I didn't answer. My silence was the answer. It created a vacuum, and his paranoia rushed in to fill it. His eyes darted from me to the clerk to the bailiff, looking for anyone who could explain this sudden plot twist. He was starting to realize that the man he'd been kicking wasn't a stray dog, but a hornet's nest. The judge was visibly rattled. The smug certainty was gone, replaced by a sputtering rage. He had lost control, and my calm refusal to be his punching bag was driving him insane. He saw the smirks disappear from the faces of the other lawyers. He saw the dawning curiosity in the eyes of the court staff. His authority was a leaking balloon. "You think you're clever, don't you, Mr. Thorne?" He spat, his voice getting louder. "You come into my courtroom with your cheap suit and your condescending silence, and you think you can play games with me? You think you can threaten me with your little reports?" He stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. He was a man completely unraveling in real time. "Let me tell you who I am. I am Judge Lawrence Holston. I have sat on this bench for 20 years. I have sent men to prison for life. And you," he said, pointing a trembling finger at me, "are nothing, an annoyance." He wasn't really talking to me anymore. He was putting on a show for the courtroom, trying to reclaim his dominance through sheer volume. "I am tired of your silent insolence. You stand there as if you are judging me. In my courtroom, I am the judge here. Me!" His voice cracked on that last word. The room was dead silent. Even Peterson looked terrified, realizing his guy was spiraling. The judge took a ragged breath, but it was too late. He had shown everyone his entire hand. He had just demonstrated, more effectively than any report I could ever write, exactly who he was. Then came the final, fatal mistake. "Counselor," he said, his voice dripping with venom, "if you have nothing of substance to add, I suggest you sit down and let the real lawyers handle this. In fact, I'm considering having the bailiff escort you out so the adults can talk." He smiled a cruel, triumphant grin. He thought he'd won. He'd offered the ultimate humiliation, getting thrown out of court. He leaned back, waiting for me to finally break, but I didn't. I just took one slow, centering breath. It was time to end this. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed my chair back. The sound was deafening in the silence. I wasn't standing to object, I was standing to approach. I picked up the thin file from my table and with measured steps, I walked directly toward the bench. The bailiff tensed. The judge's eyes widened in alarm, then narrowed in fury. "What do you think you're doing?" he roared. "Take one more step and you'll be in a holding cell. Bailiff!" I stopped right in front of the bench, just below him. I didn't look up. I looked down at the sealed manila folder in my hands. It was marked with a single word: Holston. With a calm, steady hand, I placed the file on the bench. It landed with a soft, final thud. Then I looked up and met his eyes. My voice was no longer quiet. It was firm, clear, and carried the weight of an office he had failed to recognize. "Actually, Your Honor," I began, my voice cutting through his bluster like a scalpel, "I was just giving you enough rope. As the lead prosecutor assigned by the State Attorney General to the Judicial Oversight Committee's investigation into this courthouse, I want to thank you." The color drained from his face. It was like a switch had been flipped, leaving behind a pale, waxy mask of sheer terror. I went on, my voice unwavering. "We've had reports for months about your bias, your abuse of power, this hostile environment you've created. I was assigned to observe and document. Frankly, I thought it would take weeks to get proof this solid. But you managed to do it all for me in under an hour. You gave us a live, perfect, undeniable demonstration." I tapped the file. "This contains the formal complaints. But the best evidence? It just happened, and it's all on the record." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. His entire world, his power, his pride, his career had just collapsed. He shrank into his robes, becoming something small and fragile. His eyes darted around the room, not for support, but for an escape that wasn't there. He saw the court reporter, whose fingers had never stopped moving. He saw the bailiff, who was now looking at him. waiting for a different kind of order. He saw the faces in the courtroom, no longer his subjects, but witnesses to his ruin. I leaned in just a bit, lowering my voice so only he could hear. My report will be accurate, and now it's complete. The aftermath was swift and silent. There was no shouting, no dramatic arrest, just the quiet, brutal dismantling of a man's life. Two people in suits who had been sitting quietly in the back stood up and approached the bench, observers from the Oversight Committee. They spoke in hushed tones to the bailiff. The bailiff turned to the judge. "Judge Holston," he said, his voice stripped of all deference, "will you please come with us?" Holston didn't respond. He just stared at the file with name on it. One of the committee members, a stern-faced woman, spoke to him directly. "Lawrence, it's over. Let's go." He was escorted out of his own courtroom through a side door. He didn't say a word. His career was over, ended not by some long legal battle, but by his own ego in a single morning. The courtroom was left in a state of shock. Peterson, the smug opposing counsel, looked like he had seen a ghost, his face ashen. He was a man who had tied himself to a sinking ship, and he was just now realizing the water was at his ankles. He avoided my eyes, grabbed his things with trembling hands, and practically ran out of the room. I walked back to my table where Alex was staring at me, his mouth wide open. What are you?" I gave him a small smile. "I'm your lawyer." I turned to the clerk, who looked at me with a mix of shock and profound relief. "Given the circumstances," I said, my voice back to that of a simple attorney, "the state will be dropping all charges against Mr. Reynolds, effective immediately." She just nodded, her eyes wide. "I'll process the dismissal, Mr. Thorne." A few minutes later, Alex and I walked out into the courthouse hallway. The weight of the world was gone from his shoulders. He was free, not because of some loophole, but because the corrupt system that came after him had finally been forced to look in the mirror. In a battle of egos, the loudest person in the room rarely wins. Judge Holston thought his power came from his gavel and his title. He was wrong. Real power lies in restraint, in strategy, and in the quiet confidence that comes from knowing the truth is on your side. He wanted a fight. He wanted me to scream and yell and meet him on his chaotic battlefield. But sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to just be still. Let your opponent exhaust themselves. Let them expose their own weakness. Let them walk right into the trap they set for you. I walked away without fighting, and without doing so, I won everything. What would you have done in this situation? Let me know in the comments. And for more stories of unexpected justice, make sure to subscribe.